So we just read in the psalm that we read responsively together, "Happy are those whose delight is in the instruction of the Lord, and on his teaching they meditate day and night." And so we might ask, well, what is that teaching? Lord, and the Lord says, "Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even life itself, cannot be my disciple. If you do not pick up the cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. Also, none of you can become my disciple unless you give up all your possessions." Happy end of summer, huh? When's the last time you got the priorities speech? Everybody's heard it. I guarantee it at one time or another. And now that we find ourselves at summer's end and the beginning of another school year, the priorities speech is back in season, in full force, right? Those who work in our schools, on behalf of our students, have probably heard it again. How many teachers or helpers in school, custodians, whoever, how many people work in schools? Raise your hand. I want to see. We've got some here today. Okay, we got a few. These brave souls have already suffered through a variety of in-service days at the beginning of the school year before kids even showed up. And they all got the priority speech in different forms, one way or another. And you retired people, you know what they are, right? You got the speech from superintendents or principals or department heads. That now, everything else must take second place to priority number one, which is the educational and developmental welfare of their students. It's the priority speech. Students. How many students do we have here this morning? Raise your hand if you're in school. Okay, lots of you. Whether it's in kindergarten or all the way up into college and beyond into graduate school, you've probably been on the end of the receiving end of the speech too. Whether in orientation days before classes began, or you heard it from your teachers on the first day of school, or more likely than not, you heard it from mom and or dad around a kitchen table before that first day of school. That now everything else in your life must be subservient to your one job of being a student, right? That means everything else is lower on the priorities list, including but not limited to after-school jobs, hanging with friends, social media, sports, imagined romantic interests, okay, video gaming, and must-see TV. Now, certainly that list has changed a little bit since some of us were in school, but I'll guarantee you the essence of that speech has not changed, right? Athletes are on the receiving end of this speech, the priorities speech, as sports seasons crank up again. It's been 40 years now, this last week, since I went out for my first high school sports team. 40 years. What the heck? 40 years. But I remember like it was yesterday, sitting on the cool green grass just outside of Patrick Henry High School in North Minneapolis. We were stretching before our first workout of the cross-country racing season. I was new to this thing, and our coach, Coach Craig Canham, was giving us the priorities speech. And he said something to this effect. He said, cross-country is a work sport. You will get out of it exactly as much as you put in. So, if the smell of sweat makes you queasy, you may be excused. If you're not interested in work, you're in the wrong place. If the thought of pain is abhorrent to you, I didn't even know what abhorrent meant. I had to go look it up afterwards. But as we said, if pain is abhorrent to you, don't even bother coming to the gear checkout after this practice. Because we will work, and we will sweat, and we will find out your tolerance for pain. And in that process, you will discover, he said, just how much you're capable of. If you're willing to put this sport at the top of your priorities list, right behind faith, family, and schoolwork. Everything else, he said, had better be a distant fifth. Coach Craig Canham was kind of North Minneapolis's answer to legendary Packers coach Vince Lombardi, who was fond of telling his players, "Gentlemen, we will be successful if you keep these things in order: your faith, your family, and the Green Bay Packers." But not necessarily in that order. That's what he said. The priority speech. You don't have to be an instructor or a student or an athlete to have heard it. You've probably heard it before. I'll guarantee you, if you've been on the receiving end of a wedding sermon, you've heard it before. Forsaking all others and cleaving to this one, right? If you've ever had a mom or a dad, I can pretty much guarantee you've heard it. The priority speech. If you've ever had a job, on your first day, you heard it. The question is, have you been obedient to those priorities? Now, some would argue that there are certain personality types that are simply more obedient and subservient than other personality types, and that dictates whether or not a person receives well or not the priority speech. I say that's nonsense, because I believe every single person in this room has the same capability towards obedience, and you practice it. Oh, yes, you do, right? What dictates obedience is not one's fear or how compliant their personality, but rather how life-giving they perceive the thing to which they offer their obedience. For example, a student becomes obedient to their studies, putting other things down the priorities list when she or he perceives the good that comes from doing that. Whether they perceive that good to be academic honors or better grades or a deeper understanding of the world, or maybe something as simple as getting out of study hall early, right? They find in the pursuit of learning life. They find life there for them. An athlete becomes obedient to their sport, putting other things down the priorities list, subjecting their body to strict regimens, watching what they put in their body, getting proper sleep, going all in during workouts and practices, studying playbooks, studying their competition. When they perceive the good that comes from doing what's in their power to do in order to be their best, they find life somehow in the pursuit of athletic excellence. A person becomes obedient to another person in the marriage relationship, forsaking all others and honoring those vows and those promises, dedicating themselves to the needs of the other, as long as their needs don't involve folding laundry. There are limits, after all, to this, right? But they do this. They dedicate themselves to that one because every other friendship, every other relationship, every other association pales in comparison to what they share with this one person for whom they sacrifice. And it's not that they start despising all other men and women once they speak those marriage vows. It's that they find life. They find life in the pursuit of sacrifice for this one that they love and who loves them right back. Someone becomes obedient to the demands of parenthood. Why? Because they find life in giving themselves away for the life of this little one that's been put in their arms. I happen to know someone rather well who is slavishly devoted to the pursuit of wildlife, whether with a camera or a bow. Now, there are lots of other ways that he could be spending his time, right? Like maybe getting a job or cracking a book once in a while, right? But he's obedient to the demands of his avocation. Why? Because he finds life there. Life in the pursuit of beautiful things. To what are you obedient? Chances are it's to the things that you perceive give you life. A person, a family, a friendship, a career, a country, a worldview, a hobby, a lifestyle. there are plenty of things that would have our allegiance and to which we pledge our obedience. Many of them are very good things. Jesus would call us to the best. Now, large crowds were traveling with him, and he turned and said to them, "Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. None of you can become my disciple unless you give up all your possessions." This is a priorities speech in more hyperbolic terms, though, than most bosses or coaches or teachers or parents would ever dare to deliver. Even preachers like me shy away from this one. Why? Because it just sounds like too much. It's just too raw. Despise all other relationships? Forego my own comfort and self-protection? Pick up a cross? In other words, welcome the consequences of going against imperial authority? Really? Sacrifice the things that offer me security? I don't know about you, but this is one priority speech I have a hard time with. Following Jesus just ought to be easier, right? But it's not. And at least he's honest about it. The question is this: in putting all things in subjection to him, is there life there for us? Because it sounds a lot like death. But is there life there for us? Because that is the only thing that could command our obedience. Are we able to perceive the good that comes from obedience to Jesus' priorities? The deal is this: his priorities are seldom easy or convenient because the field in which Jesus plays and operates is basically an arena full of need, you know. Hungry people needing to be fed, sick people needing to be healed, grieving people looking for solace, lonely people looking for a friend, a warring world looking for peace, a dying world in need of resurrection. It's a world full of crosses. And yet, a promise of life. I mentioned my high school cross-country coach, Craig Canham. I've also mentioned to you before maybe my college cross-country coach, who I met 4 years after that, or 3 years after that, named Kent Fananger. He was a living legend at Luther College, coached there for over 30 years. He grew up in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, and so that means he is an inveterate Packers fan, unfortunately, as well. And I learned that about him in our first team meeting when I was a freshman on that campus. He said that almost verbatim, ripping it from Lombardi. "Gentlemen, we will be successful," he said, "if you keep these things in order: your faith, your family, your studies, and representing this college as a runner." He never insinuated not necessarily in that order either. He meant precisely in that order. And I learned it on our first Sunday run of that fall. You see, Sundays at 8:30, like we gathered here at 8:30, we would gather at the field house for our long run of the week. It was usually between 11 and 15 miles. And he wanted to make sure we got back to the field house and got showered, so if it was our inclination, we could make it up to the worship service at 11 o'clock up at the Center for Faith and Life. And he sent us out on this run that morning. Must have been, 8:50 or so by the time we finally left the field house. And I noticed that Coach disappeared. Usually during the week, he was with us in his car, meeting us, encouraging us here, there, and everywhere along our route. But he just disappeared. And I asked one of the upperclassmen, I said, "Where'd Coach go? He's not around." And just as matter-of-factly as you please, he said, "Oh, he teaches 5th grade Sunday school at Good Shepherd Lutheran downtown. He'll meet us back at the field house after the run." Priorities. Huh? Priorities. I want you to look at the long arc of your life and ask yourself this: What is important to me? What gives me life? What do I hope for myself and my family? And ask it not just because you should, but ask it because the abundant life in the way of discipleship Jesus both promises and announces takes sacrifice. And it demands obedience. Not to earn God's grace, okay? But to live into the discipleship life that grace makes possible. This is not about our eternal destiny. Jesus has taken care of that on Calvary. This is about the caliber and character of our Christian witness. And like anything else worth doing, discipleship, following Him, it takes time and work and practice. In a word, it takes everything. And it is life itself. It is life itself. Amen.